Welcome to the We Hack Purple podcast, where each episode we meet a new person from the information security industry. And it's season 3, so we're talking a lot about the security of software. This episode is sponsored by the Day of Security, which I am a huge fan of. It is coming up very soon. And so it's actually May 18th virtually and then May 19th in person in Redwood City, California, which I'm told is right near the Bay Area where all the startups do all their stuff. I'm not a geography expert, so I'm just gonna have to take everyone's word on it. But my guest today is Ray Espinoza. Ray, welcome.
Tanya, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. So all my guests are like, we already know who Tanya is, or all my listeners, but can you tell us a bit more about you?
Sure, I'm happy to. So I'm Ray. I am VP and CISO at a company called Inspective. We do bug bounty as a service and pen test as a service. I'm also a high school football coach and a high school strength and Olympic lifting coach at Camas High School. A father of 4, a husband of almost 20 years in less than 1 month, and I love security.
That is such a good intro. I really like it. Also, congratulations. 20 years is an accomplishment at
Absolutely.
anything, especially marriage. Yes. So I met Ray through Megan Jacot, who was on our podcast like a few months ago. You probably all remember Megan. And if you didn't, you can go and listen to that right after you listen to this. She's also really nice and does lots of awesome stuff. But I wanted to have Ray on because him and I both talk a lot about building a good culture in the places we work. And he has done this for a really long time. So did you want to talk to us like Ray, what even is a culture in an office or like an IT department? What does that mean?
Absolutely. And honestly, I feel like it changes, and it's changed. You have this pre-pandemic, what culture was like during the pandemic, where everybody's figuring it out. And now like this post-pandemic, and I guess we can call it that, right? Of what that really means. And I've always been one to try to drive inclusiveness and understanding. And I remember early on feeling like security education and culture was a lot more, no, you did something wrong, bad form, you were going to be roasted. There was even a time, and it wasn't related to security, where there was a leader in my career who believed in publicly shaming folks with like a cone of shame almost. So I would say it's the opposite of that. But I had an opportunity. My first security gig was at eBay. I spent 10 years, though. After 7 years in infrastructure, I moved to incident response. And incident response, you have an opportunity to be frontline with a lot of folks. Hey, something's wrong or off or weird, or there's definitely something bad going on. What do you need from me? And maybe it's just part of who I am. I'm a little bit of the sheepdog. I'm always one to protect others, and I always want folks to feel good about reporting things and knowing that they're going to be taken care of more than anything else. And I found that always was lacking, but I would constantly lead with that. And I felt like, gosh, when I treat folks like that, they're so much more helpful and they're so grateful. And that's how I would like to be treated as well. And so I've taken that as a theme and tried to apply it in a bunch of different ways. But that I feel was like one of the biggest missing pieces here now, is just leading with empathy and arming people to make good decisions.
How do you think? So I'm going off script a bit, which is the thing that I do, but like when I was little, my mom was always like, treat others how you'd like to be treated. You might not get it back, but you'll get back way more often. If you want people to be kind to you, be kind to them. So when you're saying this, I'm like, oh, that all makes perfect sense. Why does it not make perfect sense to everyone? Or do you think like they just don't think about other people they work with?
I think it's more of the latter of there was this understanding of like, and I've worked with folks, and some of them are fantastic and they're beautiful minds, but not always great people, and so I think some of it is like, well, they should know better, or they should have, how dare they click this link? I mean, come on, we do training once a year. How would you not know this? And I'm like, I know, right? Once a year. Who would do that? But it ultimately just came down to of like, we can do this better, and it should be on us. It should be our responsibility to lean into them, not the other
Yeah.
way around. But I think it definitely comes back from like that stereotypical, like person in IT of like, excuse me, I know everything, you're doing everything wrong. And that's just not the way that I work. If anything, I'm always learning. I can do things a million times better, and maybe that's just sort of my approach. But that's definitely something I saw as a constant.
Yeah, me too. So, okay, so let's say I feel like if people are listening to this podcast or watching this video, they're going to agree we want a positive security culture. So, we want people to think about security more or maybe ask us if they're not sure. What are some of the things we could potentially do to try to foster that?
Fantastic. That's a great question. So, first, I think there's engaging with folks and educating and teaching them more ways than just this gosh darn, CBT stuff that you do once a year to check that compliance box. And so, I've had great success with doing threat briefings and taking like a big juicy topic that maybe everyone's heard about, like LastPass or like the SolarWinds breach, something along there, taking all those technical details and first breaking down what's a breach and what actually happens and who was behind it, and then based off of what we know, how did this work? And so usually there's something that somebody can take away that's both technical, but also if you're not technical, and I shouldn't assume that if you're plugging in, you should know exactly how a SQL injection works. And why would I even explain what SQLi is? Because I just threw it out there and you should know. Taking all that away and saying, let me tell a story. And Tanya, you and I had an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about that. And I mentioned this little security theater with with some of the spirit fingers, but make it engaging and interesting for folks to engage. And if you can do that, that leads to more leaning in. And that's not the be all end all, but I feel like just being a good storyteller and making it easy for folks to understand and engage. I'd always get great questions afterwards. And I feel like that's almost a trait. You crushed your talk at a conference when there's a line of people there at the end where they're like, all right, you guys got to get out, the next speaker's coming. But I feel like surely I can do that same thing virtually, or at least enable a forum where they can go in and be like, hey, you said that thing, and where do I find more of that, or how do I get better and feel more confident myself?
Yeah. So you said a couple of things I want to dig into slightly. So you said CBT, computer-based training. I have had some not awesome experiences with that personally. Like, does that checkbox stuff work? When people are like, oh, you have to watch these security awareness training videos, because I've done security for so long, to me, I'm like, well, this is stupid. Everyone should know this. But that said, like, does it actually for people that don't already know the security, does it actually help? And if you don't know, that's okay. I'm just curious because to me, it's like death by PowerPoint. It's very awful and like kind of cruel. Sorry.
I've seen terrible training, and I felt like, is there something that could positive that could be taken away? Sure. If you've never been exposed to any of this and this is all new,
Yeah.
then you can probably take away a few things. When you've seen the same video or same series multiple times every year, I was at a company for 10 years and I sure as heck saw a lot of the same stuff. When you get away from that cheesy 70 kind of feel of like reenacting some of those things, and I feel like you can get good value from it. I will say that lately there are folks that I found that are disrupting the industry by trying to take just a different approach and making it more engaging, and kind of similar theme to my threat briefings. Right hand security is one of them that comes to mind immediately, of like, let's not only train folks differently and make it easy and more engaging for them to learn, but let's also figure out if they have issues, try to help them gently come back to be like, maybe there's an opportunity for you to retrain, or maybe there's something that we can dig into around why this continues to happen to you. And so that just right and just in time type of training.
Okay, so you said like 20 things I liked. Okay, so I want to ask you about giving briefings, but I also wanted, oh, you just said something at the end that I really liked about explaining the why. So what if we start with, could you talk about like the idea of giving a briefing and like what a non-technical briefing might look like, what a threat briefing or more technical briefing might look like? Because a threat briefing could maybe be both. You tell me,
Yeah. So threat briefing, I say it has to be both. It has to be explain everything, but tell the story and make sure that there's technical bits to what you say. But my grandma should be able to listen to it and be like, Huh, Miho, that's really interesting. Okay, I think I get it, but there are like technical brown bags that I think make a ton of sense. And we would typically do this with engineering, or we do this with product groups. I'm a big fan of targeted training for accounting and finance, and treating all these different groups slightly different, so that the threats that we talk about and the things we talk about, it's in their language, it's in with the same acronyms, and it's things that they can understand, they're likely to see. That is all part of building that culture of, again, arming folks with the awareness of what we don't expect you to know everything. We just need you to know where to come from, where to go to ask for help, and know that you're going to be treated, respectfully and with empathy and support. And we found like that with the training, again, it gets more folks to buy in.
So like when you give a briefing, so I got a really cool briefing that I'm not allowed talking about on Friday, and I was like, and I left in like, even though I work in security, having it was like a very deep, based on lots of intelligence briefing, and I was just like, oh, and like all Friday I was like, oh, kind of scared. um, do you find that like, when you give these briefings, do people walk out and they're like, I'm scared straight, I'm not going to plug all those USB keys from that I found in the parking lot into my computer ever again? Or do you find that they're like, it goes over their head? Or how do you connect that to like, I don't know, a help desk person or a person that works in finance?
So there's two things to that. One, always ask for feedback of, what do you think? Was this helpful? Was it engaging? I personally try not to ever lead with fear. I mean, it's one thing where you just put some information out there and people are like, holy crap, like that scares the crap out of me, and I've been there. There's times where I read things and I feel that same way. And so I think there is maybe a natural part of that where you feel like your mind is now awake to this whole new thing that you felt like you should have known this whole time, and now you're really worried about it. And as a parent, like I'm like, shoot, I get nervous about lots of stuff all the time, and so sometimes I just have to curate my internet reading. So I think there's part of that, but again, just bringing it back to of help them understand why. And you mentioned something that I should have as well, and it's um, okay, now I remember. It's coming back and helping them understand the why. And part of that briefing, and then even after the briefing, it's, why do we talk about these things? And there's also a bit around what happened and who done it, and all of those. But then there's like, what does this mean for us? And what are we doing about this specific thing? Or are we? I tend to be a lot more transparent than maybe some of my leadership teams have appreciated at times. And I'm like, look, if you know where we are and you know my plan and you know why am I making you not plug USB keys into your drive? I want you to understand the reasons why and the threats, so that I'm not just this person or my team. We're not just these folks saying, do this thing or don't do this thing. It's like, here's how I'm trying to help you protect yourself and protect all of our data, and that you are also a part of the security team. And so that only works if you're transparent around, what are we doing and why are we prioritizing and all of these things, because it helps bring that together. And I feel like that helps add like that believability and that trust factor. And there is one piece I would love to get your take on too, but I was really big into, rate me, rate the team, like, and rate yourself. Are we arming you? Do you feel confident that you know how to respond to specific types of threats you're going to see? And if not, we're not doing a good enough job. We have to find better ways to engage. And so I started that a few years back at Cobalt. It was awesome to be able to get some of that feedback. And I've been able to take that and apply that at a larger company and whatnot. And we started to see, some of the success from there. And it's funny, some of the team is like, whoa, I don't know if I want my peers to rate how I'm doing. And I'm like, why? Then why are we doing this thing? How do we expect them to buy in if we don't have skin in the game? I don't know. What do you think about that?
So I agree so much. I think so. I have little ones at home as well. I am a proud stepmama, and it's like parenting light. It's awesome. I get all the hugs, and then when they've been bad, I'm like, well, you better talk to your parent. I'm gonna run away now. But I make some mean snacks, Ray. But anyway, back to the one hand. um, I feel like they always ask why. So, don't don't put your hands on the floor and then immediately like put them in your mouth. Why? Okay, well, there's bacteria on the floor. is bacteria scary? I'm like, well, if you get like, sometimes you do enough, you could get sick. So for instance, don't lick. We had to have the don't lick stuff at the airport discussion. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't lick things at the airport, especially. Why the airport, especially? Well, let me explain risk. Um, and so, but it turns out adults like knowing why.
Mhm.
And when you are just like, don't do this, they're like, yeah. But then when you explain why, especially I find if you can give them a specific example of something that happened where you work or to a person they know or a person like someone like them. Does that make sense?
100%.
Do you find that there's some things maybe we shouldn't share? So I used to do like counterterrorism stuff and I stopped doing it because I could not sleep. And so at RSA, I talked to someone and he shared some stuff he wasn't supposed to about like some terrorism things. And I was like, and I've been like worrying if, but like they had solved it. And so like when I did counterterrorism stuff, it was cool because I saw my work save lives, and that's amazing. And I can only imagine what doctors feel like all the time with like having such pride to like literally save someone. But at the same time, like I feel like there's a heaviness to that, and I couldn't imagine sharing information like that with the general public because they'd run around just be like, and they just like throw all their iPhones in the river. Like, like how do we decide what we can share and what's like too scary? And I don't mean that other adults are dumb. I don't mean that in any, just like it's too heavy a
Sure.
load for some people, for me especially.
It's such a great question. I always feel like if there's something we can do about it, or if we're enabling someone with information that they can do to protect their family, protect themselves, or to be aware of to prevent something even worse from occurring, then I almost feel a responsibility to be able to share. If there's just, I mean, we all know there's some crazy shit that's out there, right? And there's sometimes there's nothing that we can do about it. And and so at that point, does it cause more harm than it does good arming folks with information? I think some folks are maybe more prepared to be able to carry some of that, and some folks are just not. And so that's my line is, can I make it actionable and something that they can do with it, or is there some sort of, there's such, the imminent risk is so high that they just need to know. And I guess it still comes back to, and then when this happens, or if you feel like it does, then maybe do this or prepare by these things. So it's a very interesting, and there's probably not a right answer, because there's clearly edge cases where you're like, no way, this would freak people out and they would, never. Yeah.
I used to be a like let's share nothing person because I was always worried it would be too much. And then so I had a job somewhere and we did a security champions program, which is what I want to ask you about next. And we had this one team that wouldn't cooperate, and their manager literally said, F off, Tanya, stay the F away from my team, stop wasting their time. And he would literally walk over and like, and even though he was a smaller man than I am sized woman, I'm still like, oh, this guy's ticked. I do not need to mess with this guy who, and I was like a mama bear with my dev team and wouldn't let people go and ask them to do random off topic tasks that weren't approved either, right? So I'm like, okay, I feel you. But we needed their team to attend the security training, and they just wouldn't.
Right.
They wouldn't engage with my test results. They're just like, go away. And I had tried bribing them with donuts and pizza. It had not worked. And usually that's like my go-to, something that smells delicious. And so my boss was like, we have to share about the security incidents. I'm like, no, they can't know we're not perfect. They can't know. They can't know when we fail. They won't trust us. He's like, no, being vulnerable takes strength. I'm like, we don't have this strength. And so he shared with them some security incidents that we had. And one of them was like a keylogger got onto 6 employees' computers. And then one of them was a grandma, and she had like done banking at work. So I had to help her change her banking passwords. He's like, literally, there was a grandma crying on Tanya's shoulder, literally crying. Her shoulder was wet, literally, because we failed. And that's what happens when we fail. People literally cry. And then he told them the last incident, and they were like, wow, that's terrible. He's like, that was your app. And Tanya had given you those results and you wouldn't listen. And then this happened. And it's cost like, and like this and that. And he's like, Tanya had to work really late. Really, we all did. He just made it sound like I'm the whole team, which is not true. There's like 5 of us. But he's like, she needs you. She can't do it without you. She's our only AppSec person. And if you keep fighting with her, like she'll fail. She'll fail again and again and again. And I was like, And that got them. And so they turned into my first champions. And I
Mhm.
was hoping you could talk about like what are security champions? Like why is that important? Like you and I both have positive feels about this. So can you take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I mean, making it real is for anybody on almost any topic. I feel like is the secret sauce because there's so many things that happen. It's like, oh, well, that doesn't happen here, or it doesn't happen in our community, or not in our company. That's somebody else's problem. And then when it does, and you're like, oh my gosh, like we are not immune. There's definitely something powerful about that, and I think that's really that's ultimately a lot of the crux behind even the threat briefings of like, here's what we're doing and here's where it like makes me a little bit nervous, but yeah, bringing that home for them. I've had similar types of issues with trying to get security champion type of folks engaged. We went the grassroots approach of like flyers in the break rooms and different buildings and whatnot of like, we need your help, we need you to buy in. And then we have some folks kind of show up, and then we start talking about here's what we'd like to do, and here's the charter and what the things that we this huge grand plan of what we want security champions to be, and immediately they're like, I already got a lot of work to do, and this sounds like a lot more. And then, or you have the boss of like, whoa, 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 like I didn't approve this, and we have goals and we have these things. And so that was like my first epic failure of like, best effort, like we're just going to grassroots this thing and find the folks that really want it, because surely there's lots of folks who really want to learn more and want to lean in, and we're going to be there for them. Get the buy-in, help the business understand, because ultimately what I also found is, I thought I did a good job, and I went to all the different business leaders, different business units, and all the product groups, and I'm like, hey, we're doing this thing, here's the problem, here's what we believe the outcome to be, and we need your support. And they're like, nah, okay. And so we have that first meeting after that, and there's a bunch of interns or new college grads, and the whole idea was we want folks to be, in design reviews, in scrum planning, to be like, hold up folks, that sounds a little risky, maybe we need to think about it differently. And these are not the folks that are going to do that. They're the ones standing behind everybody in the stand up, and they're like, I don't want to say anything because they're super ninjas here in the room. And so we found like that was another miss as well, of we're asking them like, what are the big problems that your product group is trying to solve? And they're like, I don't know. And like, well, have you looked at pen test reports for your product? We have some suggestions, what do you think? And they're like, I don't know, my boss just told me I have to be here. And and you find like you have the wrong person. And so that was like, again, like failure number two of not setting the right expectations. And it's almost like, when you go to those fortune teller and you put your dollar in, and like you have to ask the right question. And maybe it's a chat GPT prompt. You need a prompt, a really good prompt, to get a really good answer back. And gosh, it's the same thing with that business leader of like, here's all the things that I need, and here's the criteria, and so this is what we're going to get out there. And I found like the more clearer I was around the business impact, the higher the chances. But even still, finite amount of time, they already have all these commitments, and customers want things, and so they're like, Ray, we love security, we want to do security, but like, how do I make time? And so I'm like, shoot, I got to go up another level. And so then I'm pleading with the CEO and the rest of the executive leadership team of like, folks, we have this issue, and here's this big problem, and here's where we're headed. And you see like there's a crash in the intersection, and we're going 100 miles an hour. And so do you want to hit those cars in the intersection? No, great. Can you cascade this down, that this is what we need? And I found like only then do we start to feel like, okay, 10% of our sprints, every sprint is going to be dedicated to security. I'm like, great, fantastic. Let me prioritize this work and make sure you're getting the right stuff done. And so I'll kind of pause there for thoughts, but just that buy-in piece was like the biggest constant slap me in the face of like, what am I doing wrong? Oh, I'm not setting the right expectations. And then even some of the leaders would be like, how do we know it's working? I like, can I get a pen test with zero reports on, or zero findings? And I was like, shoot, that's not a reasonable outcome. So again, what do we expect? What's the benefit of the person they send? What's the benefit to their business unit? And then how do we make that, measurable as much as we can with the indicators and data we have? So I'll pause there. Like, what are your thoughts on just kind of the buy-in piece, and what have you seen with that?
I have found that when you force people to be a security champion, that they're really crappy champions.
Oh yeah.
And then instead, I try to attract them. And so we've already discussed how I use bribery. And by that, I mean pizza and or donuts, bagels, like carbs and or sugar work really well. I've heard apple fritters I had some dinner guests, and they're like apple fritters is where it's at.
Mhm.
Um, but what other ways could we try to get their buy-in or get them interested or even curious about being a security champion?
So I think having some sort of tangible outcome for them, I found is really key as well. One of the things that we had done at a previous organization I was a part of is that we got them a license for Secure Code Warrior, and a lot of them are like, I want to know how to not only just spot the things but fix the things right. And like, great, we will pay for this and we'll make it measurable for you. And well, I'll even go as far as talking to your manager or your senior leader and see if we can get work time dedicated for you to invest in your own development for this. So I found that helpful, but again, not helpful for all. Another thing that we had done that ended up working out really well is to try to understand what are the problems your teams face. Are there constant issues, and can we collectively source solutions for your problems? There was an opportunity where we were able to come up with code patterns for authentication and authorization for a number of different products that had a similar tech stack, similar enough we were able to use. And so we ended up kind of removing that from being on the engineers, and they were able to focus on creating other features. And so helping them come together to try to solve problems, or say, hey, I have this other problem and we're this weird tech stack and we're all different from all of you, but what do you guys think we can do to try to address some of those? And so having them like a takeaway of like a real issue that their team is facing and providing tangible value to them that they can bring back was also really good. And then giving them an out, like we say, this is maybe, I felt like 3 months was too short to really kind of get to understand, really go. So 6 months was kind of like the term. And then we have like this, and if you want to keep going, we would love you. But then maybe at a year, if there's somebody else who you can pass the baton and you feel great about, and we feel great about, we would love to continue to drive more folks through here. But they really gotta, really gotta be a part of it. But the pizza and the donuts and the apple fritters, my goodness, sign me up for those as well. Those technically, those always work for me. But I found like those big takeaways where they can either stand out to their team or solve a team problem. That's where we felt like we were cooking with gas a bit, because they're like, wow, okay, like this is something beyond even just me. It's, I can look good and I can learn new things.
Yes. Okay. So I have like 50,000 things to say, but I'm going to take this moment to thank our sponsor. So thank you, Day of Security, for being our sponsor. Day of Security is a conference that's dedicated to trying to get, like, to help make a permanent change. We want to have way more women and every gender and every single type of person in security. And Day of Security is an event dedicated to this. So it is May. So there's 2 days. So there's a virtual day, which is May 18th. And then there's an in-person day, May 19th. And that is coming up fast. So if you want tickets, there's still some for sale, which is awesome. And We Hack Purple is a very, very proud sponsor of this conference. And we have them sponsoring a few podcast episodes in exchange, which is fantastic. If you are considering getting into security and you feel like maybe a little nervous, this is a very soft, gentle, friendly community. No one's going to be mean to you. No one's going to be like, they don't know enough to be here. You're new and you don't belong. That is the exact opposite of the culture around this event, which is wonderful. I also am supposed to promote that We Hack Purple has a sale on right now on all of our open source intelligence gathering courses with Joe Gray. I think it's 30% off, which is pretty good. And so people have been buying packages of all of Joe's courses all together. We also have a new course from Ed Harmouche on encryption. So like he has like multiple levels for if you want to get like really deep and get your hands dirty. And we did a hands-on with him last week, and we're going to release that really soon. We are also looking for more sponsors for our podcast and our newsletter. And I think those are all the oh, and I have one last thing. So after this, we're speaking about carbs. I'm baking chocolate chip cookies, both gluten-free and regular ones, for the OWASP Victoria meetup. And so this Thursday, May 11th, I will be the presenter for our first post-COVID in-person meetup on Vancouver Island in Victoria. Everyone is welcome and it's free, and you'll have cookies baked by me personally. And so I use carbs all the time to bribe people. So please come if you live on the island. We'd love to meet you. Go to meetup.com and look up OWASP Victoria. You'll find us. I have checked all of my promotion boxes. Hit subscribe, press the like button, do the things. Okay, back to the important stuff. Okay, so I think security champions are really valuable. I used to have a community of practice when I was a developer. And over the 3 years I ran it, I won 6 awards, and we ended up getting it to the point where we were streaming it across the entire government. And I started adding all sorts of things to make a well-rounded developer. Like we had a nutritionist come in, we had a person that came in that showed us stretches to undo the damage from sitting at a desk all day. We had someone teach us how to go running at lunch and not be the stinky person in meetings all afternoon. And then eventually it turned into, if you attend so many per quarter, all of us got to go and do a team building thing in the afternoon together. And it became like this social proof thing, like, well, don't you want to go with all the cool kids and go play pool or do whatever we would do? So one thing that we noticed, which is why they agreed to this, was that basically people that attended were taking no sick days. People that used to take lots of sick days were not taking like any sick days. Wow. And so for them, that return on investment was like, boom. And they're using more modern technologies. They're doing this, they're doing that. Like we've just noticed like fewer bugs. We've noticed the devs smile a lot. And so they're like, so whatever, keep doing it, do that a lot, do all the things. And I was like, great, this is awesome. And so have you noticed anything that you could call a return on investment? And it's okay if it's just a story, it doesn't have to be like specific metrics, but like, have you noticed like positive things from a Security Champions program?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of it comes back down to of doing some not only group related work, but also helping the devs understand, like, here's the issues that we've constantly seen with the products that you're representing. And here's either our ways to hopefully try to address some of these systemically, or or if you already know, how can we help you prioritize? And then we start using, continue to assess, knowing that perfection is not what we're looking for, but trying to drive overall some of that down. Because at the end of the day, it's like, we want things to change for the better. And can we arm you to do that? And can we give you data to do that? One of the things that we found that's kind of related, but not, is that at a previous organization, we were using our Security Champions as like a primary router for like open issues. And I find like that was met with sort of like mixed results. And it's like, it stops being real beneficial for them and their team, and more so of like beneficial to us. And so we kind of had to learn, kind of taking a step back of, where's the best way to go? And usually the person's like, can you try my manager? Like, let me do the cool stuff. But ultimately that was really the return of like, are we developing you? And, are you, are there badges? Are there things that you can show that's just tangible value for the time you're investing? Are we making your product better, either by helping you solve some of these issues, or are we just just a resource that you can bring in, to try to drive through some of these issues and feel like, folks, I don't know, but I know a person and I can bring them in and then we can like solve this thing. And so like being that for those folks and showing up for them, it's that trust, and then building the trust, and then not letting them down, and just being really transparent. I would love to help you, but like, I have all these things, so maybe it's maybe in this way instead, or maybe I can bring someone else. And I always found, like, again, leading with honesty and transparency, and where folks where we're at seems to work out really well.
I feel there's like some themes throughout all the things we've talked about today. So one is empathy, and you already like hit the nail on the head with that right at the beginning. You're like, boom, if you don't have that, you might be okay, but you'll never be great.
Absolutely.
But another one that I like over and over again, like you just keep weaving it through, is storytelling. Where does storytelling fit into all of this? Why is that important?
It's funny that I had this teacher back in 6th grade, Mr. Gaines, Hugh Gaines, amazing teacher. One of the things that I remember growing up is that he would have this story time right after lunch in our 6th grade classroom, and it was typically on history. Like, I vividly remember him talking about like the Maya and explaining their culture and what things look like. And he was such a great storyteller. Many times I would sit there with my hands together and I would close my eyes and I would imagine and just see that there. And I always felt like that was so profound and so impactful. Of all the ways that we learned, that guy knew how to tell stories. And, there was a number of other things, like just that he would instill overall trust. I mean, he was very big and helped me not make some very terrible decisions at like a very pivotal point, with me growing up. But I felt like that storytelling aspect was very impactful, of like, if we can find a way to connect with somebody in a way that they can grab onto, like, it should be about the outcome and not just like, I want to deliver things this way. And then I felt like, I guess, it kind of have a knack for it. Like, it felt natural for me. It's like, I enjoy it. I love hearing it. And so surely I can continue to try to get better to tell stories. And maybe I'm going to affect somebody else the same way that Mr. Gaines affected me. And it's one of the ways that I pour a lot of energy into my community and coaching and just being around kids is if I can help one, then like that's it. Like I've won, and if I can help many, then oh my gosh, it's even better. But I felt like just making it easy to understand and never assuming folks know all the things. Storytelling all the time is just relatable, or you can see it in your mind, and it just feels so impactful.
Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Okay, so I love all of this. Okay, so we're getting close to the end. So I'm going to ask a question. So, like, let's say someone works at a company and they're on the security team and they're like, our culture here just totally stinks. People, call us the Department of No, people don't like us, or people aren't engaging with the security team. It's not necessarily hostile, but it's just like, it's not security positive. What
Mhm.
would be one or two things maybe that they could just try to dip their toe into trying to improve their culture?
Yeah, a lot of what I do, and I've stepped into situations where there was like a bad like precedence, and I had to come in, and a lot of it is just building relationships and trying to build genuine relationships, going and understanding like what do you really need from us as a team, and where have we failed you in the past, and like I can only be a part of the solution, and I almost come in with no baggage, right? Because like I wasn't there before, or even if you have been there and maybe you're just newly empowered, and I've grown from like the team lead to manager and continued on that journey of like, yeah, now I'm in a position to be able to affect change, but help me understand what you need. And so I find that goes a long way in just getting buy-in. And many times it ends up becoming a two-way street of like, here's what we struggle with, or here's the biggest risk that I have, or, how do we align on some of these goals? Building those relationships and taking time to genuinely invest in those is probably like the secret to where I've gotten to in my career, just genuinely caring about other folks and them helping me in return. And it's been huge. So that piece is great. And then also take a step back and ask yourself, have we done enough to share about what we do and why we do what we do? And maybe a threat briefing is a briefing of the story and making it kind of sexy on this topic, but then there's also a here's what we're prioritizing and here's why we're doing it. Here's the why. And maybe that doesn't have to be a presentation. It can be done in Slack asynchronously. And here's some slides that kind of talk a little bit about what are our priorities and why and what are we trying to solve. And then you earn some credibility by saying, we signed up for these things, we delivered these things, and the next quarter I'm going to tell you all the new stuff that we're doing and why those are important. And you start to slowly add credibility. So when you have an opportunity to be in front of folks, you have like a captivated ear. It's not like I don't know about this guy. It's more so of like, okay, like I've seen them do some stuff and it's actually making my life better, or I want to understand why they're making my life harder, and then all the last thing I will say is have a way for your folks to share feedback around how you're impacting them, and whether it's reporting issues, it's sharing feedback. Do they feel confident with the threats they're likely to face, and accept that feedback for what it is of can I do my job better? If I'm responsible for making sure folks are educated and that we're protecting data, that means I got to find all of the ways to do that, and you shouldn't just be like, nope, it's just this way. Let the people tell you what they need and what they want, and then lean into that. So that would be it.
Okay, I need to take notes after this. Like that, all of that is so good. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so I want to add one thing that's not. So my friend Nikki Becker from the DevSlot project I was part of, she's like, whenever I go to a new meeting, they've never met me before. Maybe they've had not awesome run-ins with security. I come in and I'm like, hi, I'm Nikki. I'm from security, and I come in peace. And she's like, everyone laughs, and she's like, but seriously, like, how can I help your team be more awesome? And part of that is security. So I want to help. And she's like, people just like, they're smiling and they're like, she's like, it just changes the whole feel. And so I want to take what she did and what you did, mash it together and do that from now on. I love it.
Absolutely. Make it less scary and less formal. And, like we don't need to have our ties and our suits and our power suits and like
Yeah.
let's be people and figure out how we can help each other.
Yes. Okay. So my listeners are probably like, where can I get more Ray? So Ray, could you share some things that you're passionate about that you want to promote, and maybe if people could follow you somewhere and learn more?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn, you can search by my name is probably where I'm most active. Also on Twitter as well, at Ray Espinoza Sec. I will say that it's half security, a whole lot of football and training, and just kids that I coach and kind of pumping them up too. So as long as you're open for for some of that, and it's not all just one track, that's awesome. I'm also super thankful and honored to be a board member for Raices Cyber. They're an organization that is looking to try to help folks of Latinx descent come into cyber and learn about cyber and provide ways to help folks get started, and just general awareness overall as a whole that is an opportunity to do that. So I highly encourage any folks out there to lean in. They're looking for folks to be able to support in many ways. And so that's it's all awesome.
Also, I think we mentioned some other communities that we both also support and think are fantastic are Black Girls Hack and Black Girls in Cyber, and
Absolutely.
Black in Cyber, just generally, like all y'all, everyone, we want everyone here. We
It's all
do.
about having folks have an opportunity to learn and see cybersecurity as an option for them. It's one of the reasons why I talk about it at my local high school. And I even find with them of like, "Oh, I thought you have to be a coder, and it's like there's tons of different ways, and tons of different types of jobs. So the awareness piece is huge.
Yeah. So if you're a listener right now, if you could do me and Ray a favor, if you know someone, especially like a teenager or someone that isn't already in cybersecurity, but you see any interest whatsoever, invite them. Invite them, whether it be to go to B-Sides with you, like a conference. Oh yeah, I'm speaking at B-Sides Seattle later this month. Everyone please come. I was supposed to say that. Fox checked. My marketing person's like, she's gonna strangle me. Anyway, um, but like bring them to a conference, bring them to a meetup, introduce them to one of these many clubs, like if they feel intimidated. So I used to always be the only woman, right? Everywhere I'd go, I'd be the only woman. And I'm like, oh, come on. And so what I did was I went to like a capture the flag contest and I formed an all woman team. So I would not be the only woman there. And then one of them's like, well, we should party. Let's wear party dresses. So we wore cute dresses and pink and we would squeal and do little dances and we got flags. And later the organizers are like, how do we make that happen every time? Like, we want you to be a part of this. We don't know how to reach out. And so it turns out lots of orgs, they want you so bad. You have no idea how badly you're wanted. Please extend invitations like Ray and I do. And
I would love to just add on to that small point. I spent a lot of time, mentoring. I've had an opportunity to mentor in some of the clubs that we've mentioned here as well. I mean, I would definitely, from a call to action for anybody who's listening, if you know somebody who just wants to learn, sometimes just hearing your journey, because we've all had these weird different journeys and no one, well, I would say no one. Now there's actually curriculum in colleges to then go into cybersecurity. But everybody has a slightly different story, and sometimes that'll resonate or connect with somebody. I mean, I've had so many folks invest in me throughout my career. I feel it's my responsibility to give it back. And so if you're unsure of where to go, or you don't feel like you have somebody, reach out over LinkedIn, reach out over Twitter. If I can help, that'd be great. If I can connect you with somebody, that would be great. I mean, we all have to do our part, and I'm hugely vested in helping you get your start.
oh my gosh, that's so generous and wonderful. Thank you so much, Ray. This has been absolutely spectacular. I'm really excited. And I really hope that like all the things you shared can help people have more positive security culture. And also, I feel like if there's more positive security culture in general, more people are likely to join the security team. And then we win even more.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Ray. And thank you, Megan, if you're listening, for introducing us. Thank you, Dave Security, for being our sponsor. Thank you the most to the listeners and the viewers. I appreciate you so much. For now, I'm Tanya, and this is Ray, and we will see you next time.